Welcome to Fast Politics, Justin Wolfers.
Fast politics and fast economics.
That's right. Speak very quickly. Let's talk about where we are at this moment. 50% tariffs on the EU. No, wait, just kidding. No, they don't start till July. Is it undermining Donald Trump's own authority to be back and forth on something so major?
I think the question might actually be leading the witness.
Nah.
And it might, well, these are complicated times. Look, I'm coming on your show right now as Professor of Economics. And I think the best thing that I can give your audience is the advice that nasal breathing can help calm you down. And maybe we should just do a little bit of that. And
Meditation.
Zen right now.
Yeah. Talk us through where we are right now. Are we in a pause in the trade war?
That's what Russ said to Rachel.
Right? Are we in a pause in the trade war?
No.
Now. We're in the trade war.
Multi-front, multipolar. I don't know what multipolar means. It sounds fancy. Multi-front.
Yeah.
Trade war. Look, it's funny. Someone told me the other day, they said, Justin, you're really funny. I know this is about the economy, not about me, but I'm getting somewhere.
I'll take it.
And I'm like, no, I'm not funny. But geez, the world is giving us some material right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it turns out if you just literally describe what's happening, people find it really funny when they're not crying. So let me do that. The president on April 2nd declared Liberation Day. The American economy would be fixed. He was going to use his favorite tool, tariffs. Tariffs were going to do a lot of things. They were going to get rid of fentanyl, illegal immigration, secure national security, bring manufacturing jobs home, raise revenue, allow tax cuts for the rich, and balance bilateral trade deficits. I think some other things, cure toe fungus. So he announces that on April 2nd. April 9th, markets have freaked out. Everyone has called the White House and said, don't do this, you're destroying the American economy. Rather than admit he was wrong, the president reverses course and says, I was just kidding. I didn't actually want tariffs. What I wanted was negotiating power. Out of the deal. Out of the deal.
Right, exactly.
So the utterly incoherent tariffs he took off, declared a 90-day pause, kept 10% tariffs on every country around the world, and said, we're going to make deals. A couple of weeks later said in an interview, I've now made 200 deals. The Treasury Secretary reported, in fact, that he meant sub-deals, not deals, thereby inventing a new word. They reported that they had been called by dozens and later more than dozens of countries. They said they were making trade deals left, right, and center, and they'd already made a dozen or more. Peter Navarro says they were going to make 90 deals in 90 days. A typical trade deal, by the way, from a fully staffed, coherent White House takes 2 years from one country. We have 192 trading partners. So Navarro says 90 in 90 days. Later on, about halfway through the 90-day pause, people start asking at about 30 days into this 90-day pause when they have to get 90, one a day done, and we're currently batting 0, which is a very low test score, very low batting average. We're getting 0, and so people get antsy, and they're like, hey, where's the deals, man? So the next day, the White House announces a trade deal with Britain. In a subsequent press conference, the British Prime Minister, when asked, did you expect to be announcing a trade deal today, said no. I was called halfway through the Arsenal football game. So what that says is literally the night before, someone from America called and said, we're in the middle of something, but we now need to announce tomorrow. So they announced, a lot of pomp and ceremony. The president declared it the greatest trade deal ever made. You read the document, which wasn't released that day, it was released the next day. The document ends with both sides acknowledge that this is not a legally binding agreement. So at that point, we're now 0 trade deals. Trump does not call President Xi. He makes it very clear he didn't call President Xi. President Xi makes it clear he didn't call Trump. Yet somehow miraculously they communicated. There was a meeting in Geneva. The Treasury Secretary went over. And at the end, they declared a trade deal. What you actually saw was they had incredibly high tariffs on each other, prohibitively high. 145% is what we had on China. They had 125% on us. They both said, this is pointless. Let's move it back down. They did. You read the agreement, the deal is the United States and China agrees to have mechanisms by which we can talk in the future.
Right.
But that's not a deal. Okay, so we're still moving forward. Navarro's still saying we're 90 deals in 90 days. Time moves on. And then suddenly Trump discovers, this is not a joke, he discovers that if you try to make 90 deals, 90 countries will try and call you at the same time. And metaphorically, the White House switchboard gets jammed.
Right.
So he says, well, actually, we're not going to have 90 deals in 90 days. Some of these deals, we're just going to send them a letter.
Right.
Now, Molly, I'm in a relationship. And when Betsy and I want to organize our lives together, we sit down and meet and we talk about it.
Right.
And there's give and take. And I say what I want and she says what she needs. But if I instead just said, Betsy, I'm going to send you a letter, whatever it is that Betsy and I trade back and forward would no longer be traded. That's not a deal. So the new deal is that we're going to send everyone a letter. Fair enough, except they're going to make deals now with the 18 biggest trading partners, which becomes very complicated because Australia starts calling me and they say, are we 18th or 19th? It depends which table you look up.
Right.
No one knows. And then I know I'm going on, but this is just
No,
literally,
this is where we need to get caught up
literally
on the
what
back
happened.
and forth. Yeah.
And okay, so we're still at no trade deals. And in the midst of all this, the president says, and I kid you not, this is the craziest thing. The president says, the European Union are not negotiating in good faith.
Yeah. Why? What
Um,
was the driver on that?
Honestly, the Europeans take trade seriously and they want
Right.
grown-up talks. And they are hard to deal with. I mean, some of them speak
Right.
French for crying out loud. But I mean, I just want you to understand the context of this, right? He's failed to get anything done with anyone. And in the middle of the pause, and it's literally a pause, it's paused till July 9, says, well, they're not even doing anything good faith. To which I believe the Europeans are entitled to the old Ross response, I thought we were on a pause. And so he says they're not acting in good faith, so I am going to raise tariffs on the European Union to 50%. He did that last Friday. To be clear, because it's a high-wage country, set of countries, as the United States is, a 50% tariff effectively means stop the boats. It's an embargo. Nothing's coming in. I also want to impress upon people the stakes here. You might be thinking, oh, well, effete liberals are going to have to do without their French wine. You'll have to drink Spanish wine. Like,
Right.
no, not even Spanish, boy, you'll have to drink Argentinian, although I would recommend Australian. And maybe people felt good about your next New York party having slightly less fancy wine, Molly. I assume that's how you spend your days.
Right.
Is it? I mean, you don't. I know
I
you and
don't
I enjoy a
drink, so
mocktail.
I don't have
Yeah,
a horse in this race, but I do understand this is not just about wine and cheese, and I
right.
hope you'll
Don't
enlighten us.
exactly. Molly's stealing all my economics points. So one of the things that's happened
Sorry.
over recent weeks is Molly has graduated from political commentator to economic analyst. And I'm not making fun of Molly. I'm proud of my girl. Am I allowed to say that? That sounds sexist,
Yes,
but I am
yes,
proud of
yes,
you,
it's
Mom.
not sexist. No, I
Um,
mean, I did write a lot about subprime, so I have had some, but yes.
oh,
S
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I
I
mean,
underestimated you.
I no,
But
listen,
it is important if you
but
want to
trade
be,
is different than subprime, and, these are different things, you know?
and if you want to be a serious political analyst in the current moment, you do need to think about and understand the economics, which is why you've been doing
For
your homework
sure.
assiduously.
Well,
I've been following you, Molly. You haven't
and
gotten a thing wrong. Let's get back to the
okay, good.
story. I know
Yes,
that's
let's get back.
ADHD
Yes,
right
yes,
now that,
yes.
my therapist told me to keep going. Okay, so what we get, so what do we get from Europe? Actually, the most important thing is like precision machinery. So if you want to build a factory in America, if you want to get your stuff packaged and out the door, those big conveyor belts that look so gleaming and sexy, most of them come from Germany or Italy.
Right,
So if
right,
you're halfway through building a factory and you just found out the price of your equipment, if you buy it, goes up 50%, you might actually just stop building the factory. Good work,
right,
Mr. President. We get chemicals, we get pharmaceuticals. In fact, most of what we get from Europe you would classify as inputs into American production rather
right.
than wine and cheese.
So
So,
that's things like, uh, parts of cars,
yep,
parts of
parts of cars,
things.
electronics
Yeah,
parts. This
yeah.
is this is how you sabotage American industry.
Right.
That's all right. You might be upset about it. I was on Friday, but don't worry. We got all the way through to Monday before the president backed down. And I think basically the European Union called and said, hey, we're on a pause. Why do you think we can negotiate a trade deal in less than 90 days, given that your entire trade team has been off doing all sorts of other things instead?
Yeah,
So now the pause, the 90-day pause that came into effect on April 9th, that he then paused. So he paused the pause on Friday. On Monday, he paused the pause on the pause,
right.
thereby resuming the original pause. That
Till
pause will end.
July 4th, right?
I think it's
Or
the 9th. July
okay.
4th is when we enjoy freedom
Yes,
from tyranny, and we
yes,
celebrate small government, ironically enough.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
that we celebrate lots of
Steeped
things.
steeped in irony.
Yes, we celebrate, we move away from a single king toward
Yes. Towards a single king.
we shall celebrate it like no other. So the pause that was paused got unpaused. And so we're back to the original pause, which means now that as of July 9th, we'll learn what's happening with trade with the European Union. Okay,
Right.
so now to rewind. Our trading situation with the European Union is currently unknown until July 9th. Our trade situation with Britain is currently unknown because we have no agreement, but we've agreed to continue talking. Our future trading situation in China is unknown because all we've agreed is to continue to keep talking. And there are 189 other countries around the world, none of whom have made headlines, with the exception, of course, of the Heard and McDonald Islands, which the Trump administration subsequently has discovered is uninhabited, and therefore they are unlikely to do a deal with that particular set of penguins.
Right now,
Yeah.
we have the highest tariffs ever since World War II.
I'd say since 1934.
Yeah.
It depends on the
What
day.
happened in the 1920s, the late 1920s? Just sorry, go on.
So the great
Remind me
thing
what
about it
happened.
is I never did
Guy called
American history
Smoot?
in high
Right, go
school,
on.
so you could just
Yeah.
trick me. But I hear
Yeah.
there's a lot of things happening background then.
I
Not the
think
least of which was
tariffs.
just the Depression-era Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, our tariff rates were higher than Smoot-Hawley. Then they got lower. If the European Union's at 50%, it's hard to do math in my head. Might be higher again. But actually, let me simplify it for our audience. For an industrialized country, the standard tariff rate is around about 1 to 2%. The tariff rate that almost every country, with a few small exceptions, charges the United States is about 1 to 3%. So if the United States has an average tariff rate, as of today, of, remember, 10% on the whole world, 30% on China, 25% on autos, it gets very, very complicated. We have very large spreadsheets. I've got friends who are maintaining all of this. But roughly speaking, the American tariff rate is 10 times higher than it was on January 1st, 10 times higher than similar countries, and 10 times higher than our trading partners. So this is, when you knock tariffs from 145% down to 30%, as we did with China, that sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's moving from an embargo to lunacy.
Right. I think that's a really good point, an embargo to lunacy. So where are we now with China? I thought we were down to 10% with China.
So here, I want to be very careful with my language, and I want your listeners to follow the same habit. So Molly didn't say, but many others would say, they'd say, I thought we had a 30% tariff on China and they have a 10% tariff on us. That gets the numbers right, but it gets the words wrong. What
Okay.
we have is a 30% tax on Americans who buy from China.
Right.
They have a 10% tax on Chinese people who buy from America. By the way, that 30% probably hurts us a lot, right? So if you're doing any sort of importing, and it's not just finished goods. Remember, a lot of what we buy, in fact, from China is equipment. If you're a tradesman, a lot of your tools might come from China. You're going to be charged a 30% upcharge. And more to the point, what I want you to realize is that in every other country around the world, if you want to build a factory and buy Chinese-made equipment for that factory, you can do so without a 30% upcharge. The only country that gets this 30% upcharge is the United States. And that might make you really mad. You might be really mad at China. Why is China charging me a 30% upcharge? It's not. That's not Beijing. That's Washington.
Right. Right.
In addition, Beijing is taxing Chinese people who buy from the United States. That's going to lead, on balance, some number of purchases, particularly of agricultural goods and commodities. Why would you pay more to buy from an American? They're going to purchase from elsewhere. So that's what's going to hurt, particularly the farmers. Basically, they're going to have to cut their prices in order to sell their goods.
Farmers are going to have to cut their prices in order to sell their goods?
Well, if we've got a 30% tariff from China, if you were trying to sell stuff to China before, the Chinese are not going to pay 30% extra for American soybeans. They'll buy their soybeans from someone else.
But there
Right,
aren't
10%.
huge
I
there
missed
aren't huge there aren't huge margins with farming.
There's not huge margins on lots of things.
Yes. So won't
Hey,
this
by the way,
just
can I tell you
kill
an
our
industry that has
farmers?
huge margins? I know you want to talk about farmers, but you know what? An industry that
Sorry.
has high-paying jobs, that has really fat margins, and that you don't have to walk out in your field and do backbreaking work, and where you're not at the mercy of the weather,
Yeah.
higher education. I am one of America's great exporters. I know I don't look
Right.
like a farmer. I don't even sound like an American. But I have students come from all around the world who want to fly into the University of Michigan to do exactly what we're doing right now, Molly, talk
Not
economics
not
together.
for long, baby.
Right. I'm not allowed to export. It's one of the few goods where normally when we export, we send the goods abroad. When we export services, you come into America, you get the service, you leave, but you leave your cash behind.
Mm-hmm.
They're not letting them in the country. If you're not letting them in the country, they're not going to send their checks. If they're not sending their checks, then there's going to be, I know, I get it. No one likes effete liberals and higher education and indoctrination and all of that. But actually, we are the future. The question for your
Mm-hmm.
listeners is, do you want your kids to grow up and work in a factory that was created because of Trump's tariffs? Or would you rather them have the sort of job that I am so privileged to have, where I get to wake up and read and talk to interesting people and educate, and I get paid more? And your kids will get paid more if we grow the higher education sector. And so just the very direct sense, my industry is directly under threat. The set of jobs that surround that industry, the people who work for the University of Michigan and universities across the country. And that's before we get into the rest of everything else that higher education brings to our lives. Just thought I'd put a little ad in for my industry, mate.
I wonder, would just see so much backpedaling with the tariffs, which I think is actually, thank God for that. Remember, because there were weeks and weeks where he just wouldn't backpedal. But I wonder again, like you can't predict the future, but you can sort of read the past. So, uh, what do you think? What would a good resolution of this problem look like? And what would a sort of Trumpy resolution of this problem look like?
Okay. Let me start on backpedaling. Liberals have taken particular delight that the president takes a super macho stance and then a week later backs off. This time it was 3 days later, but
Right.
sometimes it lasts even more days than that. I don't think they should. So first of all, realize the things he's backed off on are the profoundly insane. Like they're truly Fruit Loopy. So the April
Mm.
2 tariffs that he called reciprocal tariffs, where he was putting a 50% tariff on Lesotho because he thought Lesotho was somehow must be protecting its industries because they don't buy much from us, but we buy a lot of diamonds from them.
Hmm.
Understand the insanity of that. That he had a reciprocal tariff on Korea, a country with which we actually have a free trade agreement. So the word reciprocal was a lie. The level of the tariffs was not only unconscionable and uneconomic, but unmoored from any sense of reality.
Hmm.
And then that's what's currently on a pause. Okay, so that was literally the worst trade decision of my lifetime. He paused. The good thing about the president is if you thought that was the worst thing of your lifetime, just wait 2 weeks. And then we got the 145% tariff on China, which is among the top 2 worst trade decisions of my lifetime.
Right.
That, we got that back down to 30%. And then I am sure this is only the 3rd worst trade decision of my lifetime. The 50% tariff on the European Union, which he then knocked back down to 10% until July 9th, right? What relief does several weeks of lower tariffs? But this is your point earlier, Molly. The average tariff rate around the world is probably going to be about 17, 18, 19%. The average tariff rate for an industrialized country is 2%. The
Right.
idea that Trump always backs down isn't quite right.
Right. Because they're
The
still terrible.
worst excesses, the unimaginably stupid, he gets talked out of.
Right.
The merely profoundly mistaken and intensely damaging, he sticks with. And that's
Hmm.
where we're at. So Molly is, I want to let everyone in on the joke because apparently it's funny. Molly's referring to the taco trade. Trump always chickens out. So 1, everyone likes tacos. 2, the most recent chickening out was on a Tuesday. So this is all terrific. But notice that Trump doesn't always chicken out. He walked into the British negotiations and said the tariff is 10%, even though you buy more of our stuff than we buy of yours. And that
Right.
10% tariff is 100% stuck. And that's where we're still at very high tariff. We're still at 30% with China. We're at 10% with every other country around the world still. This is an enormous and higher in some industries. So this remains an enormous and intensely damaging set of tariffs. That wasn't answering the question. That was, you picked up, he always backtracks. Let's talk about that.
Right.
Kind of sort of sometimes does a bit, but let's not overstate it because that makes it feel like there's no damage here. There's a lot of damage. Second, you said, what does a good solution look like? This one's easy, and I've only really just gotten my head around it, because it's so simple. The right answer is for Congress to do its job. The Constitution gives the power of tariffs to Congress. Full stop. Past Congresses delegated authority, emergency powers, to the president, and the president declares everything an emergency. I'm incredibly hopeful, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm hopeful that at some point all of this will be ruled unconstitutional because, in fact, there's no emergency. But we don't need to wait for the courts. Congress stops all of this tomorrow if Congress wants to. So I want people to hold on to that. The madness of the Trump administration is 100% fully enabled by Congress.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, call your congressman. And if you're still unhappy, call him or her again. Because this is the greatest abrogation of responsibility I've seen. And it's infuriating. So why does Trump go with tariffs rather than other things? Because he can.
Yeah.
The enabler there, he can't just do what he wants on fiscal policy. He can't on monetary policy. But in this, he can. And that's why the damage is being done. They gave him the loaded gun, and then they're surprised he's waving it around. That's what good looks like. Okay, what's actually going to happen?
Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, as far as I can tell, we're in one big soap opera. And it's great because normally soap operas are about complicated emotions that economists like me don't really understand. Things like love, betrayal, jealousy. But this one's all about trade deficits and tariffs. I think this is a fabulous soap opera, just a shitty economic policy. The analogy here is it's a toddler with a remote control.
Justin
Occasionally,
Wolfers.
They get bored, they dump at it, they change it, and that is American tariff policy.
Justin Wolfers. Thank you. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mom.